Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Friday Farsight. I'm your host Sheldon Picotti, and this week's episode is the construction of the first O'Neill cylinder. So that's a giant space station that rotates and has gravity. I'll let our host go into the details. I have to admit that I've not generally been that excited about space science fiction during my life. Maybe Star Wars is an exception, but in terms of reading science fiction, I came about too late, maybe from when I was born, to get into all of the golden age science fiction writers who built all these tales around space travel. But recently I've started working on a novel that features an O'Neill cylinder and a space elevator and some other stuff. And I've actually had a lot of fun with it. I've come to appreciate how much thinking in science these old writers had to do to come up with their scenarios. There's actually a fair amount of physics, like with the O'Neill cylinder. How does weather work? It's actually kind of kooky. I've found myself solving angular momentum equations to figure out what could actually work in a plausible way. So, I think it's actually more fun than I used to think. And maybe you will too after this episode with Biff and Betty. This question about building an O'Neill cylinder was actually one of the first ones I asked of the Strategic Farsight website once I built it, since I was working on that novel and wanted to check my futurism. Luckily, the model agreed with my timing. So that's two of us here who think that a giant rotating space station is plausible in the not-too-distant future. But I'll take this opportunity to remind everyone that one of us is an AI. The prediction is AI-generated, and the script and the AI hosts are AI-generated, so take all this with a grain of salt. All right, Biff and Betty, it's all yours.
All right, let's do this.
So this one's the ultimate sci-fi dream, right? By 2085, we can have, our very first O'Neill cylinder, this massive space habitat with like tens of thousands of people living in it with Earth-like conditions. I mean, wow.
Right? It's not just a dream anymore, Biff. That's the thing. This prediction from Strategic Farsight, it really lays out how it could become a reality within our lifetimes or, soon after. It's the culmination of decades of progress in space manufacturing, asteroid mining, artificial gravity, and closed-loop life support.
Amazing. I keep picturing like a giant hamster wheel in space, but, with a Starbucks and like a skate park. But Betty, how does a massive space habitat with parks and trees and clouds, how does it get built by us tiny primates down here in the biosphere? I mean, it sounds like something out of a classic space opera. Not something we'd see in, 60-odd years?
Well, it really starts with the vision of Gerard K. O'Neill back in the 1970s. He imagined these cylinders up to 20 miles long and 5 miles in diameter, essentially creating their own artificial gravity through rotation. Think of it like centrifugal force, keeping everything glued down. And the key is placing them at these stable Lagrange points between the Earth and the Moon, so they stay put.
Okay, so, we're talking about spinning giant cans in space, but how do you build something that big and make it livable? That's where my skepticism kicks in a little.
For sure, Biff. It would be an unprecedented engineering feat, but one that becomes feasible once we have several enabling technologies. First, we need space manufacturing, industrial-scale processing of materials right there in orbit. The National Space Society, for instance, they've got a roadmap suggesting we could see this emerge between 2050 and 2070. And then second, resource acquisition. O'Neill himself envisioned using lunar materials. Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin, he's talked about all heavy industry eventually moving off Earth, greatly reducing, damage to the environment. Plus, asteroid mining companies like TransAstra, they're predicting commercial exploitation of space resources by the 2040s, which, that's exactly what you'd need for this scale of construction.
So we're not launching every single piece from Earth. We're building it out there from the moon, from asteroids. That makes a little more sense. Like when the settlers came to America, they didn't bring the log cabins with them, I don't think.
Exactly. Then third, closed-loop life support. This is crucial for long-term habitation. We're talking about systems that fully recycle air, water, waste. Projects like the European Space Agency's Melissa and NASA's ECLSS, they're the early steps. But they'll need another 20 to 30 years of development and testing to support thousands of people.
Recycling. Is that just a nice way of saying that you have to drink your own pee?
Well, actually, Biff, recycled water on the International Space Station already includes urine, along with condensation and even the carbon dioxide from the crew's breathing. That's NASA's ECLSS, or Environmental Control and Life Support Systems. The Melissa project in Europe is a research consortium which really wants to take the technology to the next level. We're talking fully artificial ecosystems able to recycle waste into everything a human crew needs, including food. Much of their work focuses on biological processes. Think algae and bacteria, which have the potential to match today's life support systems at a much lower energy cost. The idea is to bring a little bit of home with us when we go into space.
Cool. Like every life support system starts to be a miniature Earth. Makes me think of Tom Robbins' idea that human beings were invented by water as a device for transporting itself from one place to another, which is why, we crawled out of the sea and now we're about to go into space. Maybe we're just the Earth's ecosystem itself getting clever enough to leave the planet.
That's quite a lyrical literary allusion, Biff.
Hey, I play the dumb guy on this show, but once in a while, I read a thing or two.
So, moving on to the fourth enabling technology, we have radiation protection. That's a huge one beyond Earth's magnetic field. The National Academy of Sciences has highlighted this as a critical barrier. It'll absolutely require massive innovation in material science. And finally, artificial gravity. We understand the physics, but building these colossal rotating structures, that's an unprecedented engineering feat. But smaller precursors, like the Gateway Foundation's proposed stations, could be ready by 2040 or 2050, paving the way.
All right. I mean, I'm starting to see the progression. It's not just like snap your fingers and there's an O'Neill cylinder. It's a whole lot of steps. But then there's the money, right? And the politics. That seems like a bigger hurdle than, designing the perfect cosmic HVAC system.
You're totally right, Biv. On the economic side, launch costs have to fall dramatically. SpaceX has made huge strides, but for habitat construction to be economically viable, we're talking about costs around $100 per kilogram to LEO, or low Earth orbit. We're still an order of magnitude higher than that.
How do we close that gap?
The prediction doesn't get specific about launch technology, but there's another prediction in the Strategic Farsight database that a space elevator could be developed around 2065.
Far out. We might even live to see that one. And that would do it, right? A cable into the sky, no need to burn rocket fuel?
The cost savings are estimated at 20x, so yes.
Check. Now, I know how this works. The predictions are each made individually by the AI, which is why they don't reference each other. But here's one where you just wish you could set them up on a blind date,
They do align nicely, like they come from the same future. But we'll have to leave it there for now. We'd need the system to run a trend or scenario analysis to really connect the dots.
Okay, so launch costs seem to be covered, and much of the construction material comes from space anyway. What else?
Well, the sheer investment scale, even with new technologies, it's mind-boggling. The ISS cost around $150 billion. An O'Neill cylinder could cost 10 to 100 times that. That kind of funding, it's going to demand massive international cooperation or, some really significant private wealth.
So we're talking about like an actual spacefaring United Nations or, a cabal of super rich tech billionaires just deciding, hey, let's build a space city. That's a tough sell.
Well, it's not just about money, it's also about socio-political drivers. As Al Globus from the National Space Society put it, space settlement will require either a much cheaper path or a populace willing to spend enormous sums for the purpose. climate change, resource scarcity, or, even existential risk mitigation could be logical imperatives. But we also shouldn't underestimate sheer human ambition, imagination, and sense of adventure.
Right. So back to the space city of billionaire Trekkies?
Maybe. A habitat at that scale, hundreds of thousands of miles from Earth, it could be a lot of things. A science city for ongoing space exploration, a model community for more massive emigrations in the future. I think everyone will have their own utopian dream for it.
Sure, the ultimate planned city. I get it. I just hope they don't have an HOA.
And remember, Strategic Farsight doesn't see this happening in one huge leap. They suggest a progression. We'll see commercial LEO stations by the 2030s following the ISS, like those from Axiom Space. Then lunar orbital platforms in the 2040s, like NASA's Gateway, establishing a semi-permanent human presence beyond LEO.
Okay, so major advancements, one decade-long project after another. Makes sense. It's easy to forget we're talking about over half a century here.
Exactly. Then come the small rotating habitats in the 50s to 60s, which will house dozens to hundreds, testing those artificial gravity concepts at scale. Simultaneously, lunar and asteroid outposts, also in the 50s to 70s, will focus on resource extraction, giving us experience and materials. Then O'Neill cylinder precursors, smaller ones, for thousands of people by 2070 to 2080, demonstrating the concept's viability. And then finally, the first true O'Neill cylinder, around 2085, give or take 15 years. It's a carefully laid out path.
But there are, totally different opinions on this, right? I've heard some people say it's going to happen much sooner. Others say, forget about it. It's centuries away.
Yeah, there are significant divergences in the timeline predictions. On the optimistic side, you've got people like Jeff Bezos suggesting large-scale habitats within 50 years. The Space Studies Institute maintains there are no fundamental physics barriers, just engineering and economic challenges. And, technically they're right. No new physics required, but the engineering challenges really are formidable. If you look at historical megaprojects, even with strong backing, integrating multiple complex technological systems just takes longer. The International Space Station, for example, took over 30 years from initial concept to completion, and it's orders of magnitude smaller than an O'Neill cylinder.
So really, it's not a question of if we can do it, but when and how much of a nightmare it's going to be to build.
Pretty much. From the pessimistic side, critics like Emily Lakdawala of the Planetary Society have argued that self-sufficient space habitats might be centuries away. She cites the extreme difficulty of creating closed ecological systems and those prohibitive costs of space construction.
And that makes sense. Trying to recreate Earth's delicate balance in a can in space when on Earth, just keeping the plumbing in shape is a challenge? It sounds impossible.
It is incredibly challenging, Biff, but the counter-argument is that the accelerating pace of technological development and decreasing launch costs mean a century-long time frame is just too pessimistic. Private investment in space has dramatically increased. And you've got billionaires like Bezos expressing specific interest in O'Neill-type habitats. Plus, advances in robotics and AI are going to accelerate construction capabilities far beyond what was possible in previous generations of space technology.
Okay, so if the robots can do all the heavy lifting, maybe it's not so crazy. So Betty, in the end, what would it actually mean for us, for humanity, if, we actually pull this off by 2085?
Well, a completed O'Neill cylinder by 2085 would be one of those civilizational epoch-defining moments. The convergence of so many strands of science and engineering, it would redefine what's possible. It's not just about building a new home, it truly marks humanity's transition to a spacefaring civilization. It opens the solar system to large-scale settlement, and it could potentially alter the course of human development as significantly as the discovery of new continents did centuries ago.
Wow. So we go from being, stuck on one planet to potentially living among the stars. That's a pretty mind-blowing thought for a Friday.
It absolutely is. The scale of the O'Neill cylinder marks the inflection point where you could say human civilization, not just small expeditions or commercial operations, has made a home for itself in outer space. It's really the start of a new era, just as the 21st century is coming to a close.
What an episode of Friday Farsight. Thanks for joining us today, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening, and you can find the full prediction article and so much more, by the way, at the Strategic Farsight website.